Hi, welcome to Talia Nerds Out. I am at a different location than normal. I actually got out my camera and my tripod that I usually use for my knitting podcast that I do with my mom. So this is actually the normal podcasting space that I use. I'm not always physically able to handle being under this light, so we'll see how this goes. I have extreme issue with too much light physically. But anyhow, welcome to Talia Nerds Out. Let me just take a quick drink of water. I want to try to split this video a bit better than I have in the past. Usually I tend to run quite long, so maybe if I split things a little bit, have a couple of shorter videos if I seem like I'm running a bit long, maybe it will be a little bit easier for people to watch. I know that I don't tend to watch longer videos, so, why would anyone want to watch my longer videos? So we shall see. I guess that I will start with the books that I have finished since the last time. I will bring forward my reading journal that I'm now using. And this is just the journal I'll be using until, this one's finished and I can get one that's feels a little bit more reading versus this one has a Serenity Prayer on it. I just happen to have this one. And it suited my purpose. So, I meant to grab one of the books I finished. Well, when I stop the video, I will either not include this one other book that I finished in this video, or when I pause to do my second part, I guess my next video, I will get up and get the book that I forgot to grab. Anyway, the first book that I finished during this period, hang on, did I already talk about this one? I did not. Okay, just wanted to make sure. Yeah, I talked about the other one. Okay, so slightly different spread for my reading journal. I don't think I had this last time. Let me just check and see. No, I didn't. I was still only doing the pictures at that point. So I've started adding on excuse me, my stamped in worked quite right the first time, so I did it again. And here's my star rating here. I gave 4 stars. And each time I read this book, like if I reread it, I'll stamp it again. I always like it when I get a used book and it has a library card in it. I actually already had some of these library cards. I was in a tea club for a while where you get a couple teas a month. And one of the special boxes they gave out, I guess, is bookmarks library cards. So I happen to already have some. And I had this weird idea that I was going to do like other kind of journaling, but I'm just not creative in that way. I'm not terribly whimsical. So it has to be very, practical for me. I just don't work. I'm not one of those people who has these beautiful spreads. It's just not the way my brain works. But I also really enjoyed, and I'm sure, people much younger than me might not remember this, but the card catalogs for libraries, when I was being taught, I think for us, because we were homeschooled, so we didn't have any special library classes. From what I understand, some places do have that, but for us it was rolled into English. And we learned how to write library cards. We learned about the Dewey Decimal System. We learned how to look up library cards. So I went and I found a site that would help me find out what the Dewey Decimal Code and what the Library Congress Code would be for any given book, what the most popular code would be for any given book. And then I found a different site that if I looked up the code for the Dewey Decimal, I could figure out what that meant. Oh, this means that this is English history. Oh, this means that this whatever. So it's always fun when I look up the code and I find out why they coded it that way, and I don't always think it matches, but it's interesting when it just to find out why they choose to put it that way. So here's my library catalog card. That won't come out. This will. If I was to reread the book, I would put this out, stamp it again. And yes, I do actually have a stamp for that. And so this is Gentleman of Uncertain Fortune by Rory Muir? I don't know how to pronounce that. And the other part of the title is How Younger Sons Made Their Way in Jane Austen's England. This is a Yale University Press book. It was put out in 2019, and I read the digital form. Just used my stamp again because I wanted to. I am putting this stamp in all my, physical books. And there is my sketch of the title. I didn't feel like doing the sketch with all the men across because I just didn't feel like doing it. I am also typing out my review right now because my handwriting is not always the best, and I don't want all these scratch outs all over my journal. So like I said, I gave this book 4 stars, and this was a book that for the most part I enjoyed, as evidenced by the 4-star rating. However, at times I did find this book to be a little dry. It was written in a very scholarly manner, which actually, on one hand, yes, it makes it for a bit of a longer read. On the other hand, I do appreciate that because it does not, it gives the feeling of perhaps being more based on research versus a story. And I don't get me wrong, I do love the story aspect of history. That is what history is. It's looking back on the stories of people in the past, the stories of countries in the past, the stories of wars in the past, whatever in the past, peoples in the past. So that history is a story. But I don't necessarily like history books that are too reminiscent of more of a historical fiction style of writing. It makes me question the scholarship. It does help if there are footnotes or endnotes. That does make me feel a little bit more confident. But as a general rule, if something feels a little too historical fiction-y, it kind of doesn't make me as inclined to... It makes me more inclined to question its scholarly value. So yes, this could be dry at times. Honestly, if I didn't have so much daytime fatigue, this probably wouldn't have been an issue. With the daytime fatigue, sometimes my mind wanders, and that has less to do with the issue in the book itself and more of a me issue. But like I mentioned, this is not a fatal flaw in the book for me. I really enjoy the footnotes, and actually in this case it was endnotes. I am that person who will flip back and forth. Even in the digital book, I do appreciate when the digital book makes it easy for you to head back to where you were in the text. They usually do make it fairly easy. But the footnotes in this, well, a lot of times it would just be like this book or this source. Sometimes it would expound a little bit more upon that. Not so much that the main text was bereft because that wasn't included, but it adds a little bit more texture to the person who does choose to go and peek into the endnotes. So I always like it when that happens too, when you get little nuggets in the endnotes that are just like little extras for the people who do go a little bit beyond. What I liked about this, okay, so it's really weird. On the one hand, I say this is scholarly, but it also does include what I like about history. which is the storytelling aspect. Let me explain. So each time they talk about the different jobs that were considered appropriate for a gentleman, a son of a gentleman, to hold, they didn't just talk about the jobs. Or I guess it was he. The author doesn't just talk about the jobs. He goes on and he gives examples. And some of these examples he will bring up in different parts of the book. So it's like he's revisiting that person that you already met at a different section, which I thoroughly enjoyed. I felt like it was a very good teaching message. It connected a person and their story with a specific job, with a specific area of work, or even specific jobs within. So you'd have law, and then you'd have like a barrister versus a lawyer who handles other things like estates or something like that, a clerk or whatever. So it was nice to have examples of people who, first of all, were in these different jobs, real actual people, and then also examples of those who succeeded, those who did middling, and then those who really didn't do so well. Things did not go the way that they would have preferred. Sorry. So this was a very effective way of getting the point across. So I really enjoyed that, to the point where one of the men, and he mentions this person, I believe it's either on the section of the Navy or the Army. I actually believe this might be the Army, because I'm pretty sure it's the Army. But there was a gentleman that was brought up, Sir Harry Smith, and just as sort of an aside, he mentions this amazing love story that he had with his wife, that he met her, I forget where he was in battle, but he met her there, and they were just like in love their whole lives, and she would always tell stories about him later. It was just a really nice, just personal little extra information that, yeah, maybe it wasn't the most necessary to move the narrative, move forward the message he was trying to give to the reader, but it made me care about this particular person and made some of the things stick. It gave me kind of image of what it was like to live in that environment. I want to say it was India, but I might be wrong, because there was a couple different places that they talked about where they sent the army. But this man's name was Sir Harry Smith, and he wrote an autobiography. So I definitely picked up his autobiography because I was intrigued and I wanted to learn more about him. So yeah, this was definitely the book's strong suit. And I'm pretty sure that I will reread this at some point, if only as a reference for context when reading Jane Austen. Now, I see myself reading it for more than that, if only because I want to revisit some of these gentlemen that I met through these pages, because you kind of feel like you know some of them by the time you're finished, even if you only got the small glimpse of a portion of their lives. But other than that, other than getting to care about these specific men, it's a must-read for anyone who is a fan of Jane Austen. It makes more understandable those things that a contemporary reader of Austen would have just automatically known, and so she doesn't necessarily expound upon it. She doesn't necessarily explain why Edward Ferrars might not have been expected, why Edward Ferrars might have been expected to not be able to support a wife immediately upon becoming a clergyman. Why that would have been a hardship financially. It also explains makes more understandable why Mary Crawford had this expectation that, oh, Edmund Bertram, yeah, he'll take his living as a clergyman, but then he can just go up in London and let his curate handle all of that. And why she was so just befuddled that that's not how he planned to do things. It explains that this was a very common practice, including the practice of having multiple livings, which I believe was also addressed in Mansfield Park. I want to say it was addressed briefly in Pride and Prejudice when Mr. Collins was advised by Mr. Bennet that he might want to consider making himself agreeable to Mr. Darcy because there might be more of a future with the nephew than with the aunt, i.e., he might have more livings to bestow upon a clergyman. And there's also something, and I didn't write this in my review, but I just remember that they were talking about waiting for a living to become available because you couldn't sell livings because, I mean, that would be considered selling a church position. That would not be considered right. I mean, people were getting around the rule. They were still kind of sort of selling them, but they weren't selling them. You could put out something that like, hey, I'm needing a curate for this curate that, you know, he's looking for a replacement, he's going to pass, but it can't be bestowed until this guy passes. So it's almost like you were waiting for the guy to die before it got bestowed upon somebody. It couldn't be given away until that point, because otherwise it looked like he sold it off. So when you talk about in Pride and Prejudice how Wickham was supposed to get the living of Pemberley, I believe it was a Pemberley, not another location that Darcy would have owned. He was supposed to get the living when the current cleric passed. But instead, Wickham decided that he wanted to forego orders and to go, I think at that point he did say, no, he didn't go army at that point. I can't remember what he chose to do at that point. But he wanted to take some monetary compensation instead of taking that living. Yet, when he burned through that money, he came back and all of a sudden he wanted that living when it became available. Darcy didn't give it to him because he had already signed away that right, but he couldn't be granted that living until it became available. So yeah, that was explained very well in the book without necessarily using those examples. Another thing this book did a good job of doing was, I'm slight sidebar, but one of my favorite Jane Austen books is Persuasion. And that's actually the one I will be reading after I finish reading Emma. And these are all rereads for me. I've read all of Jane Austen's books multiple times. Emma less often than the others because Emma's a bit of a harder read, because Emma's just a very challenging character to read, even though I love Mr. Knightley. Anyway, but I always had a hard time understanding or sympathizing with Lady Russell and her reasons for meddling in Anne Elliot's engagement in her romance with Captain Wentworth when she was younger. And this book made it a little bit more clear why this would have been considered an issue, why this would have been considered an unstable situation for a girl of not only Anne's class, but also of her age. So that added more context to Lady Russell's position for me. And I could kind of understand a little bit why she took the steps she did. Now, why she continued to try to push Anne towards Mr. Elliot instead, and kind of pretend that Captain Wentworth wasn't there, tried to direct Anne away from Captain Wentworth after Captain Wentworth had already obtained his fortune. That's where she passed out of the grounds of having some sort of, maybe you could say, moral grounds, insofar as that she was looking after the daughter of a good friend when Anne was younger, when Anne was 19 and Captain Wentworth hadn't made his fortune yet, and there was no guarantee that he would make his fortune and all that. Then you can go like, oh, well, that makes sense based off of things that this book mentions. Now, like I mentioned, later on in the book, it almost feels like Lady Russell is being classist or just stubbornly sticking to a point of view that she had developed earlier, and that she just really doesn't want Anne to be with this person because she didn't want Anne to be with this person before, and almost like she can't acknowledge that maybe she was wrong about this guy. Now, she could have been right. It might have been the right guy at the wrong time, and if she could have acknowledged that, she would have been more sympathetic in my mind. But it's also a very human reaction. Sometimes people just don't want to admit they're wrong. And I think that's kind of what happened to Lady Russell, as well as the fact that she was classist. But yeah, I really enjoyed this book. 4 out of 5 stars for me. I could see myself stamping this card again. Okay, so the next one, and I didn't bring my stamps with me to show y'all because I just didn't think of it. I am in a completely different location, so what I didn't bring with me just simply isn't here. I know, profound. So, I'm trying to think. I think rather than going on to the next book and going through that, I think I'll show a couple of things that I picked up, and then the next video I'll go through the last couple books that I finished and the things that I'm reading. I think that's the way I'll do it. So I did do some book purchasing. One of my great weaknesses and also one of my great joys is finding used books online for the best possible price and the best possible qualities I can. I just love searching for deals, and I've been known to go all over creation to find a book that is really hard to find and get it for a price that I consider to be reasonable. Now, sometimes if you go from eBay, I kind of find that they need to be prodded every once in a while, just because it seems to take forever for a book to get to you. So a couple of these are from eBay. One was a used book. I think that one was from Amazon. And this other one, I think, was from Abe Books. Now, this was actually something that I picked up as that was inspired by The Gentleman of Uncertain Fortune. They were talking, just as a side, kind of like an aside, about the War of 1812. And I was like, you know what? I don't remember having read too much about it. I think it was one of those things that's just sort of like mentioned in history books, and it just either it didn't interest me at the time, or I just simply don't remember it very well. So I went and I researched and found the book that I wanted to read. I felt like there was actually, like, it was slim pickings to find something. Maybe I'm just picky, but this book is called 1812, The War That Forged a Nation by Walter R. Bornemann. Now, I haven't made a card yet or stamped this because I wanted to, I'm waiting to stamp it until I actually start reading it. That's just my thing. I'll stamp it, make the card, make the catalog card as I start reading the book. But yeah, I got this for, a decent price. And I do look forward to reading this. It doesn't have a new book smell or anything like that. I did have to add a little tape here that's got a little bit beaten up. But all things considered, I do believe I got this for a really good price. So I'm not too upset by the quality. There's a little bit of water damage on the side and the back. Nothing too bad. But yeah, I do look forward to starting this at some point. It might not be this year, because we're already about halfway through quarter 3 of the Historathon. I'm going to have enough trouble finishing what I've got going, and I have other books I can see myself wanting to start before starting this one. So this is probably going to be a future quarter 3 read. So in the next few years, year or so, I don't know. It exists in my shelf. The other one that I got, and I'm not sure how I will feel about this. It seems to be a lot of recipes, perhaps. Maybe a bit about the history of them, which is what I was most interested in. But this is called The Tudor Kitchen, What the Tudors Ate and Drank. And I don't know if I expected... Well, it does have a little bit of talking, not just showing recipes, but giving a little bit of other information, which is really what I wanted, although the recipes will be cool too. I like the pictures that are here of different drawings about working with food, the different plates, all that kind of stuff. A lot of this does seem to be recipes, but you know, maybe at some point, I don't know that they actually give you actual like temperatures or anything. Okay, actually, I'm wrong. It's not just recipes. They give you some parts of it, like ingredients or whatever, and sometimes they'll give you a recipe, but they will explain why something's named a certain way and a little bit more about it. So it's actually more history than just recipes, which is good. I was a little afraid that it'd be more recipes. This is actually the first time I've looked at this in any depth. The next one, honestly, I fell in love with the cover. It's really nice. It's from, oops, I feel like I need to be careful with these pages. First of all, it's died down a bit, but it has a really lovely old book smell. This is a John J. Crawley and Company book. It looks like they're New York publishers. And this was printed in 1954. And it looks like the first copyright was in 1953. And it has a ton of illustrations. Part of what drew me to this, besides the fact that it has a lovely cover, is that it talks about it in order of, it looks like it's in order of when they died, of different saints, starting from ones from the Roman era, so like the martyrs of that time period, all the way through, I guess it would be, let's see the latest that they go. Well, there's 1719, 1897, then there's biblical ones. Some of these I don't understand the order they have them in, but some of the pictures are absolutely gorgeous. It talks about, I think a lot of these are actually paintings. Just some really nice pictures in here. And then also, if they have it available, they'll have part of some of the writings of the person depicted. Oh, isn't that nice? So I will probably have to be careful with this book, but it's pretty, which is part of why I wanted it. And I like when they do include the writings of the actual person being spoken of, because especially some of the older people, you don't always look at their writings unless you're making a special point of finding them. So yeah, I think this is a lovely book. The cover has this lovely embossed feel to it, like you run your fingers along, it's not just flat, it's really nice. So yeah, that is actually what I fell in love with when I first saw the book, was the cover. And then I was like, oh, the pictures are kind of nice, and so is the writings of the saints inside, but yeah, the cover. And then the fact that it smells like old book really is awesome too. Oh, and I always love, and maybe this is a bit weird, I love it when someone writes this is for somebody in here, because then it feels like, okay, I almost like you're touching into the past, even if it's not that far in the past. It's, I don't know, connection with some other person, which I've always enjoyed. I don't like so much if someone writes in the margins or something, but if I have a library card or a "this is for somebody" on there, I do like that. Now, last thing I'm going to show before I stop this video, grab the book I forgot, and then start the next one, is this one. I've been really looking forward to this one. I think I found this one when I was trying to do some research on the Dewey Decimal System for my book journal. And when I saw this, I was like, well, I have to pick this up. It's called The Library, An Illustrated History. I think I got this one through Thrift Books. Stuart A. P. Murray, introduction by Donald G. Davis Jr., forward by Nicholas A. Basbanes. What's kind of cool is this is a book about libraries that is a library book. As an ex-library book, which kind of is cool. I was a little disappointed I didn't get a library card, but it's stamped, released from circulation, Southfield Public Library in Michigan. So, got some stamping there. And also they have their little sticker. So even though I didn't get a library card, at least I got a book on libraries that was an ex-library book. So yes, I look forward to looking into this, what it'll tell me about the history of libraries. It looks like it's through eras. So we have libraries, the ancient libraries, European libraries in the Middle Ages, Europe's High Middle Ages, Renaissance to Reformation, people of the book, not quite sure. Then there is War and a Golden Age, library in colonial North America. Let's see. The library in the young United States. The library movement. Organizing knowledge. I think I probably skipped a chapter by accident. Libraries, librarians, and media centers. Libraries of the world. Yeah, I think that's where it finishes. So I do look forward to this. This is something that's not going to be connected with really any part of the Historathon. I mean, it's technically touching history, but I'm not worried about it coinciding with any quarter. This is just something I'm going to read for the absolute joy of it. There's some lovely pictures in here. I'm just going to enjoy it. So that is it for this particular video. I am going to stop the camera, jump up, get the book that I forgot, and then I will return to record the second video. I will actually probably take the books that I just showed you, the books I purchased, and return them to my room while I get the book that I forgot. So yeah, thank you very much for joining me. I will see you in the next one. If you will not be watching the next video immediately after this, have a wonderful day, and God bless. Bye.